James Muraguri is the CEO of the Institute for Public Finance and Institute of Public Finance. And he's with us in the studio. Good morning again, James.
Good morning, Latif.
Welcome again to Kenya's biggest conversation. Always a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Glad to be back.
Yeah, so when you hear that proverb, right, you do very many things to keep yourself young. There's no medicine. There's no medicine to staying young,
Yes.
to avoid old age.
You see, old age has this problem with the connotation that it comes with. And what is implied is infirmity. What is implied is lack of vision, loss of teeth, inability to move. No. You can actually get older and you're not infirm.
Yep.
You can actually get older and you're healthy. You can actually get older and you're youthful. Those are also possibilities. But when you stigmatize old age, then it becomes a problem. That's when now medicine comes in.
I actually heard no one gets old.
Yes.
Old age finds you.
Yes.
Old age finds you.
You're busy going about your life and old age just catches up with you.
Just catches up with you. But if you do the kind of things that James does, James is a proper athlete. He runs and he exercises. In fact, are you preparing for the Standard Chartered Nairobi Marathon? 30th of October. Only 42 kilometers. I mean, you do more.
You do more than that every
You do
morning.
like 47, but this time just do 42.
There is what I say, choose your struggles wisely. So, as I run many races and marathons, I think this one I pass.
This particular one.
Yes.
No, you can still do the 10K.
Oh, there's an option.
There's
Yeah.
42
Oh,
kilometers.
42, there's 21, there's
21.
10, there's,
And by the
10.
way, you can even walk.
Walk to the,
The
10.
entire 42.
Yes, you can walk. Even 42 if you want, you can walk. But
it might take you a while, but you know.
You have to start really early. Yes.
Well, that's something good to consider.
Yes. So what we are all doing now, between now and the end of the month, is preparing.
Okay.
And because you've been doing this for a long time, you'll be like our coach. So we are signing up NairobiMarathon.com for virtual race that takes place between the 25th and the 30th and the 30th.
23rd.
The 23rd and the 30th. And then the 30th itself, it's a physical race. We run. So in fact, because you always run anyway, you can do the virtual one.
Ah,
Between the 23rd and the 30th, you just go doing
And
your
record
job.
your times.
Record your time. So you register, get into the app, record your time on the app, and who knows?
Where do you
that's
run?
interesting.
Where do you run?
Yeah.
Where do you run?
Within my neighborhood in Kazalani.
You see? And you know, we saw that Eliud
Kipchoge is the name,
a
yes.
water man. So as we're preparing for the race, you know.
Can be our waterman. So you
One of us can
run
survive.
ahead of us. We catch up with you. You give us our water. You run again.
In short, you can run the 42 kilometers in installments.
Yes. As we struggle, us guys will just be doing the 5-kilometer walk.
In installments.
In installments
I'll be
too.
there to cheer you up.
Yes.
And hand them the water.
James, karibu sana again. Today we want to talk about special drawing rights for people's recovery in Kenya. And when you say that, then immediately people start wondering, special drawing rights for people's recovery in Kenya. Drawing rights is something. What is it?
Drawing lights is not having a pen and a book and having the powers to draw.
Okay.
For this particular case, drawing lights, it's a monetary term that is used as a promise. It's actually what we call reserve money. So it's a form of money, but in a promise, and which established by the International Monetary Fund, what we'd call partners or subscribers, which are governments, 190 governments in 1969. And the purpose of this, it's a reserve currency that's constituted of 5 major economies. That's the US, the Japanese, the Chinese, it should be the Japanese and the British pound. So
So we have the US, the Chinese, Japan, Britain. What's the fifth?
that should be the euro.
Euro.
It should be the euro.
Yeah.
And this, so they form a basket of what's called then the special drawing light. And the special drawing light, just to explain it in a simpler form, it would be like our major banks in Kenya choosing to have it's like M-Pesa. I mean, if I actually put it like it's M-Pesa. So M-Pesa, there is no currency called M-Pesa. The currency inside is Kenya shilling.
Yes.
But for you to use M-Pesa, you have to convert that into an actual shilling. For me to buy a blade, I have to go to a shop and say the blade costs 60 shillings, and here is what I'm converting my M-Pesa into 60 Kenya shillings.
Yes.
And then I get a blade. That's exactly what a special drawing light is. A special drawing light is not a money, it's a promise. Because M-Pesa, it's a promise by Safaricom that we will honor if you go to ask to use it as a currency. So that is the special drawing light. So it is held by countries in proportionate. They have quotas. Countries have quotas. And then your quota, you can exchange it freely with other, with other countries, and you can use it to deal with your liquidity issues as a country.
Ndru has 5 questions. City has 7. I am floating, but I get it.
Okay. So, where are you drawing from? Where are you drawing from? Where are you drawing these rights from? Who holds the server, as it were?
Absolutely. The IMF,
Okay.
the International Mother and Father,
Okay.
International Monetary Fund,
International Mother and Father, right?
holds the server of the drawing lights. And this is based on the quotas, based on their contribution to the pot. Because also the IMF, countries have their rights based on their capacity and ability. So you find the most developed economies, for example, out of the last year's special drawing lights, which were equivalent to $650 billion, they got approximately 423 billion because they have powers. They give money. So what happens is Kenya got approximately 84 billion Kenya shillings. In terms of drawing lights, that was 73 million SDRs. SDR. Now, one SDR is equivalent, $1 is equivalent to $1.40. So the dollar is stronger than the SDR.
Okay.
So our 73 million
And
dollars.
this SDR is what exactly?
Special
It's-
drawing right.
Special drawing light.
It's
It's a reserve money.
It's a thing
So it's
we
a
were talking
currency.
about.
It's a form of
it's the
currency. It's a
M-Pesa.
virtual currency that cannot be used to trade.
So it is like Bitcoin.
No.
What?
The SDR has an asset base underlying.
What?
So countries contribute to IMF
Yes,
based on their strength.
based on their strength.
These 5 you're saying
Yeah.
have contributed around $423 billion. The
No,
5
they received.
they received
They
500
received in
423
2021
billion.
out of 650 billion.
out of 650 billion.
Yes.
Now that is their strength.
Yes, that's they were allocated that based on their strength.
On their strength.
Yes.
That is a special. They were allocated, not
Yes.
necessarily that they withdrew.
No, they were just allocated.
It was it was a right. If you ever
want to
want to,
use.
you
Yes.
can withdraw up to $423 billion.
Yes.
Okay.
Kenya was allocated 60.
733 million SDRs.
733 million.
SDRs, equivalent to around 84 billion Kenya shillings.
Around
or
84
thereabout.
billion shillings.
Yes.
Okay.
That is how much we can
We can get.
from this.
Of which we have already drawn 40 billion out
Okay.
of that. Because we
Okay.
need the money.
Okay.
Okay. How do they decide how much of this SDR is allocated to you?
There's a quota defined by IMF.
And what do they base that quota on?
It's on the strength of the economy and their contribution. It's also IMF is a contributor, literally like a contributory scheme.
So IMF
Subscriptions.
is like a circle
yeah.
where people contribute to.
Yes, the countries.
Yes, okay, people as in the countries. And then also, like with circles, where you can drop to 3 times your deposit. So
You draw according to your quota.
Yes.
our quota is the equivalent of our deposit in this circle.
Yes.
Kinda. Closer
Yes.
to that.
Okay.
Yes.
Under what circumstances would you use your rights as a country?
Now, like Kenya, because of COVID, we were in a total crisis and we were not able to maintain the economy. So of our allocation, then the Ministry of Finance and Central Bank, then they are able to freely transfer our special drawing lights to, they would say, for example, we can transfer from to China. So China have their SDR, but they are not using their SDR. So they convert that into dollar in their central bank. We have our SDR, but because we cannot use our SDR to buy vaccines, we have to convert our SDRs to dollars.
All right.
So our SDL 733, National Treasury was advanced half of that, and Central Bank remained with the other half.
Okay.
So our SDL then we converted equivalent to $40 billion, 40 billion Kenya shillings, and as part of public debt. So we get to, we sell like to Chinese our SDLs. They give us money in form of dollars. Then we use the dollars to buy vaccines.
Okay.
Right.
I've got to take a step back because I could have missed it in the cloud of, So where does this money come from in the beginning? Is it a circle that in the beginning of the world everybody's putting money in? And
Everybody's contributing
everybody's
monthly.
contributing
Monthly.
monthly. However, it depends on how much you've put in there you can get out. Who does the money? Is the IMF just being benevolent and saying, okay, so we have this extra money, you can now have a quota, and then we can give it to you. You don't really have to pay it back. What is this? Is this loaned money? Now, when I remove this 40 billion as Kenya, do I have to put it back, or then do I have to now work up my quota once again? What happens?
So over the last, we're talking about since 1969, there have only been 4 instances of creation of this SDR, and the 2021 was the fourth time the SDR was created, which was equivalent to $650 billion. So it is an international reserve that's created. For example, it's like in Kenya, we would have the central bank say we have our reserve because IMF is lending money, like they have the reserves that they hold on behalf, and the quotas of each country. Then, because it's based on the strength of the economy, you will draw once they agree on the parameters. It's a scientific process for them to develop the quotas, and the quota for Kenya, for example, is like 1.2 or something of parameters they use, and which is subject to a lot of discussion by the governors. And the governors of the IMF then are, they are ministers of finance and central bank governors. So it's high-level decision-making in terms of drawing this reserve. So it's the 100% of this reserve from IMF part of resources that they have. Then they say we are going to allocate to countries to show up liquidity, and especially like now during COVID, for purposes of, for example, the cash transfers, people are not working. You have to find, food rations for people. You've got to do cash transfers for social protection, batches of vaccines where countries were not able to receive donations of vaccines. Now that's the purpose of, of each country's reserve. But it does not, ideally, you draw for it, but it does not, for example, add to your, to part of, a public debt, for example.
Oh.
Right.
So this SDR, did you say, James, that it's pegged to the dollar, or is it pegged to the euro, or is it pegged to some gold reserve, or what is it pegged to?
So as IMF was converting this particular case, it's pegged to the dollar. So the special drawing rights are pegged to the dollar.
Okay.
Yeah. The dollar,
because the pegging has to be based on some value, isn't it?
Yes.
So what's the dollar pegged
It's a strength of the economy as a free-floating global currency, which is used widely.
The strength of the economy.
Yes.
Now, this strength of the economy, as we say, it is based on what? How much the GDP, the net worth of what it is that they do, and where does the debt that they also have come in, and what role does it play?
You see, the SDRs themselves, we have 5 currencies in the pot.
5 major currencies.
5 major currencies in the pot. So we can also take the SDRs and peg it to the euro. But for the purpose of this conversation, for example, I took the dollar, right, instead of taking the euro. So as we are saying, the 456, the SDRs were 456. Equivalent to $650 billion. 456 billion SDRs equivalent to $650 billion, of which Kenya case scenario is only 733 SDRs, equivalent to 84 billion Kenya shillings. So you keep transferring just to understand the context of the to move from SDR as a reserve currency, because the SDR itself, the special drawing right, cannot be used for trading. It has to be converted to something else so that you're able to freely use it.
So we convert that SDR into one of these currencies, into the dollar. So there you get the hard cash,
The
hard
cash,
currency.
yes, for
Then you
countries,
use
vaccines.
whatever you're using it for.
Yeah.
But you're saying that this is not necessarily then added onto your public debt.
Mm-hmm.
So where does it float? Is it free money?
No, it's not free money. It then becomes part of resources that you hold as assets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got our entire allocation of SDRs.
Mm-hmm.
The central bank is holding half,
Yeah.
and the National Treasury cashed out the other half,
Yeah.
which we used, we should believe this, to purchase things that we needed.
Which they have said they didn't.
Vaccines,
For example, they have said in the report
that
recent
they did
report,
not. What did they use it for?
They said 17% of that money was used, for recurrent expenditure,
Which is
again
paying salaries and
And
exactly.
the debt.
and fueling cars.
Absolutely, and which is against fiscal objectives, because the law requires them to indicate where they have deviated from fiscal principles. So they have owned up that they,
James, when we deplete those resources, how can we replenish them?
now you go to the market, commercial market, and borrow.
But then that's not replacing, that's just acquiring debt.
So for Kenya case, if we deplete our
allocation,
pot,
yes.
our allocation, you don't have a choice. You have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
The analogy of the circle, is it possible for people to stand surety for Kenya? Some other country to say, I know you mentioned that if China isn't using theirs, you can have a chit chat with them and say, look, this thing which is idle, can we? But essentially we are borrowing, then how then do we repay them? How do we get to replenish what they have allowed us to use?
Yeah, we're busy working as citizens, so we are paying taxes.
Right.
That we do very well in this country.
Yes,
we do pay taxes.
yes. We are very hardworking citizens. So our taxes are what are used to pay.
So we can approach another country
Yeah.
and ask them to allocate us their SDR.
But you have not really. They don't give you the exact. You can only ask for your somebody's SDR if they are the ones who in need of dollars, for example,
Okay.
or euros.
So like now we give, let's say for this particular case,
Yeah.
an example, we give our SDRs to a certain country, let's say China.
Yeah.
China gave us the dollars.
Yes.
So we are done.
We are done.
Zimekanjana.
Yes.
We
So
cannot
they have
go
more-
back and
they have
tell them,
more
"No,
SDRs
kuna
in
SDRs
their
zetu."
pot.
They have more SDRs.
Yes, it's over. The transaction is over. So you finish spending your dollars, you have nothing,
How is it benefiting them to keep the SDR?
because they can also use they can sell the SDRs to another country.
Is there a
Another
point
country.
at which these SDRs increase in value? Like other currencies, do they also fluctuate or are they constant?
You see now at the point of purchase of the SDR, it's also pegged how much is the dollar worth at that point versus your currency.
Yes,
So it's
but-
1.14 to the dollar.
Yes.
So it stays 1.14 to the dollar.
No, by the time we are exchanging,
Yes.
So at $1.14 was when for example, the board decision was being made.
Okay.
But by the time we are trading with China, if it's a year down the line, if the dollar has lost value or gained, the market dynamics will dictate.
Okay. What was the initial idea behind this SDR pool?
It's to show up liquidities and liquidities of countries, to manage their liquidities, because countries do not collect enough taxes, for example, at that particular point, but they need resources. So, but also the IMF being, and the World Bank, the Bretton Woods institution, to say so, being institutions that then manage global finances and support countries, then have to find a way, but also a way of managing. But it's also a way of proper dominance by global larger economies.
Which was my next question.
Yes, this is proper colonialism.
Yes, because I'm asking what is and then my next question would be, really, what's the fundamental benefit? And must you be a member of this hoity-toity club of folks who are, putting their money out there because they don't have anything else to do with it, and insist that you also be part of it, where you can further be dominated by the world financial system?
You don't have as countries, and for example, and just to contextualize it, you see, this least developed economies received approximately $21 billion, for example. The next middle economies received some $212 billion, and then the wealthiest of countries received $433 billion of that money.
So the wealthier you are, the more money they give you.
The money you get. In fact, it's a principle of the more you have, the more we'll give you, and even the least you have, even that will take away.
So essentially, this scheme is actually set up to benefit those who already have, and to give those who don't have the impression that they're also getting something. Whereas in reality, they are actually being held to hawk. They are in a position where they are continually going to be dependent on these people. Is that not what seems to be the picture here?
Absolutely. Like I'm saying, it's a dominance. It's a question of, it's you don't need, we don't need you, you need us. So
Okay.
Yeah, that
but
bit I got,
also,
yeah.
I mean, if you look at your economy, if you're given now the 84 billion shillings, based on even your size of your economy and how much you've been contributing to IMF, it's sawa bwana, nyamaza.
Nope. Sorry.
Because you see, the other side of it is this.
Sorry.
What I'm saying is this. Look, so SDR is declared by the IMF board. It is 650 billion.
yeah,
These 5 big economies get 423 billion. The rest of you get
Returns.
based on. So it's either you're saying that decision on how to divvy up the SDR is wrong, but not the principle of SDR, or you're saying that the principle of SDR is wrong. Which is which?
the principle of SDL is not long, because globally we are so interdependent on each other. It's the concept is good, but the mechanism of distribution is what would be long, because you're giving money to those who don't need.
Yeah.
For example, by the time the SDL was being done, which is a very good concept. For Kenya, for example, benefited. We were able to support our people, social protection and stuff like that.
There you go.
But then the United States of America, which was giving us vaccine, did not need SDL for vaccine. We are the ones who needed SDL for vaccine. But their contribution to IMF demands that they receive the fair share of that. So they are holding that free floating, SDL currency.
So here's the thing. We got this SDR thing from Bretton Woods. We go to America and we tell them, we've got this SDR thing, give me cash.
Yeah.
They give us cash without us having coughed anything in between.
Yeah.
Right? It's just something that was allocated. They remain with the SDR. We get the cash. Cash is what we needed in the first place.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that, CT?
I didn't
See,
say
we needed
anything
the
was
30
wrong.
billion shillings to use. The only thing is that Mr. Ukuri Atani and his people decided to go buying flowers with our SDR money instead of buying vaccines and other essentials. But the thing is, we needed money.
Absolutely. We needed the
So
money.
if
They're
the
spending.
if the money that you got after having handed over your rights actually went towards development and something that you could see
Yeah.
in the country, making the lives of people better, then it will be all right.
Absolutely.
So the fault then does not lie on the international mother and father. The fault then lies on the governments who are taking this money and then there's nothing to show for it.
Exactly.
Well, there is something to
Chukua
show for it.
SDR unanunua curtains
Ah,
kwa
maua.
nyumba na maua. Ama unaenda pale snow cream unakula ice cream na pesa yote. And then you start complaining, these people are
Pesa
dominating
imeisha.
me.
You know, Eric,
Let's take a break.
I've never used SDR for buying ice cream.
You may just find that's what happened at the Treasury. It's 28 minutes to 9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room. James Muraguri is the CEO of the International Public Finance. What did I say? The Institute of Public Finance.
We are going
He's-
international.
He is here this morning to educate us about the special drawing right and how this special drawing right can be used for people's recovery in the country. We've learned so far, so next now he'll tell us how should it be used for people's economic recovery.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Talking about special drawing rights for people's recovery in Kenya, and we've learned about what SDR is, coming from the IMF, allocated to all the member countries, the contributors, prorated according to their strength and contributions. Small countries have gotten a small amount, big countries have gotten 423 billion of the 650 billion shillings. Kenya took its special drawing rights. We've converted half of it into cash. It's basically like receiving Naivas shopping vouchers. Then you have got to go to Naivas to convert that into
Yeah.
goods.
Yeah.
And you go home with the goods. Now, our guys have gone to Naivas and walked out with drinking water. You choose what you want to do with your SDR, with your voucher, what's within your rights. Now, how can countries like us use this SDR to benefit the people? Because, like you said, it's actually not a loan.
Absolutely.
We are not repaying. It's just coming up to show up our liquidity.
Yes.
How can we use it best?
The best case scenario would contextualize it based on like what happened yesterday, and we saw President Ruto flagging off food relief, right? So this our SDL, for example, could be much more targeted towards resilience, and climate action to ensure that this, these instances do not happen again. Then again, of course, it would also help us. We are saying that we need to provide healthcare to our people. And so we are saying, on service delivery with regards to the health sector, then how do we ensure that we have done adequate investments? Do we need to have, for example, employ more doctors? Because then we need our people to be taken care of, and those are the instances that we should have done much better on, instead of buying flowers or paying more allowances and stuff like that.
The amount of money that's left with the central bank, how much is it again?
Should be allowed 40 billion Kenya shillings or thereabout.
Okay, but it's not in cash.
No, it's not in cash. It's from the SDL.
Does it expire?
No, it does not expire.
Okay. Are the people of the country supposed to know, or should they be aware that the government, because that's who is the withdrawing, the agency then that would withdraw, are they to tell them what is happening with this money? Should they have a say in how it will be used? I may be taking a guess, but I guess, I bet that the majority of the people in the country did not even know of the existence of these special drawing rights, and then what was going to be used with it thereafter.
Absolutely.
If we're having this whole public participation conversation.
Absolutely. And I think, being here, and thanks very much for having me, it's the start of this conversation. That, for example, now we are saying central bank is holding half of the SDR reserves. Central bank should be in a position where they are able to explain to citizens that the government has asked to withdraw part of the SDR to do ABCD, before they release that. And of course, they say there's public participation when we are developing, for example, our budget. Or when they bring the supplementary budget to Parliament, and they say that's representative democracy. For example, you are members of Parliament who will represent you. But I think for this case, based on on this special drawing rights, which is not an everyday occurrence, for example, it's important for central bank, for example, to issue a note and say this is our special drawing rights. The National Treasury wants to convert this into money for purpose ABCD. Because they are sovereign rights that we as citizens own them. We actually literally own that because it's pegged on our paid up contribution, in the third quarter, at IMF, and which is citizen taxes. Literally, our taxes are the ones that are converted into SDRs based on the quarter. So the support, the transparency. So one of the things is IMF does not require countries to be transparent on the allocation of the SDRs. And this is some of the things that they are, because I think were they more push a little bit more with regards to the transparency of these things, more people would be more aware that actually this exists.
Sorry, you're going to say something, Eric?
No, say it.
Okay. I'm thinking about this special drawing right, and I'm thinking about the role it's supposed to play. But the question I'm asking myself is, are there specific things that you cannot use it for?
No, it's your money.
It's like a bonus.
Yeah.
Yes. Then it means that I can decide to go and buy myself 10 Maseratis and figure out where I'm going to drive them. And nobody should ask me.
It's your bonus. KTDA pays you as a tea farmer. If you decide to go to the bar and drink it all, shauri yako. If you decide to pay school fees for your children, shauri yako.
That's why
the question is, should there be laws, even internally, maybe, our Public Finance Management Act, should it be amended to include provision that says that our SDR shall be ring-fenced to development only?
No, but Eric, you see, the reason why I asked the question,
No.
SDRs are created for special circumstances.
Yes.
It's not an everyday thing. Something has happened. We have had a pandemic. You have a meltdown in the economy. It's supposed to help support you. So I'm arguing that it can't be for just anything that you see.
It can't support you, and then
No, just you wake up in the morning. That's why I mentioned the ridiculous 10 Maseratis. No. It has to be in line with a need that has arisen or has been brought about by this strange economic situation we find ourselves in, like during the COVID period.
Yeah, and that's why the government, in the recent report, the budget review and outlook paper, they are owning up and saying, we deviated from our fiscal objectives and fiscal principles because they are required by law. The law already provides that if you have resources on behalf of the citizens, which are, literally, if you're borrowing and taking money on behalf of the country, then, you cannot use the money the way you want. It must be planned for. In fact, spending money without planning is an offense. It's an economic offense. That we've seen people in courts on this. But I think the conversation, first of all, needs from where we are, for example, with regards to like special drawing rights for people's recovery, because actually they were driven in a conversation that they were being created for people's recovery.
yeah.
So this is a conversation that they, for example, the National Treasury, the Central Bank ought to have come and please at least done some bit of participation and informed people that we have taken these resources for people's recovery. But of course, that wasn't going to happen because then it limits them to what they want to, they want to do with those resources. And I think, that conversation, we have to drive that conversation further. As citizen, private sector, businesses have to come out and ask some little bit of more difficult questions, because if you do not ask these questions, at the end of the day, it's your taxpayers. And that's why a show like this is extremely, very important, because it's just enlightens people on what's happening with regards to the governance structure in the country with the resources available. Yeah.
So what has the National Treasury told us so far about the special drawing rights for people's recovery that we have utilized so far?
They haven't said anything apart from saying that the money that we had from that was spent. 17% of it was spent on recurrent expenditure, and that breached the fiscal principles. So the information is not as detailed as it should be, with regards to this. But however, of course, they say that part of the reason why it was spent was as part of COVID precaution to support the economy and support the people.
Right.
So but the details behind that is what's not available. So
What characterizes a breach of fiscal principles? What are we talking about here? Budget, and then you stepped outside of the budget to fund something, or what are we looking at here? That this
we are saying you borrowed money and paid salaries. You can't borrow to pay salaries, for example. That's breach. We are saying that the wage bill went beyond 35%, for example. You've breached the fiscal principles. You have not spent 30% of our resources on development spending. So those are some of the the things. So they're saying, we took money that was not supposed to be taken and we spent, for example, on the current expenditure, and they are owning up to that. But of course, in the same sentence, they are saying, we spent they spent 30.2% on development spending for the past financial year that ended in June. So they have met, for example, on trying to sustain the wage bill. They have kept that 5%, for example, and development to 30%. But this recurrent, the 17% of something that they spent on recurrent, is where they're drawing the line. But we don't know what this recurrent is.
And is it all right to just say that? Well, okay, so it seems as though it's been said, and then that's just it about that. That yes, okay, we know that we breached fiscal we breached fiscal principles. We did that, and then that's it.
We want to see action. We will see action from the Auditor General.
Okay.
Because we want the Auditor General has part of the audit processes is to look, was the money, was there value for money in spending for this, and then Parliament has to take action on that.
But that's the problem, James, and it will not be the first time that we've seen the Auditor General flag something. It doesn't matter whether it's this Auditor General, the one that was there before. And look, I mean, granted, that's their job. Yeah. Their job is to report on what they have seen. Now, whomever is supposed to come and take action thereafter seems to be the dead horse in this race.
Wow.
Because forever it will just be a storytelling affair that yes, we know there was a breach and this did not happen, but then that's just about the size of it. It doesn't happen beyond that.
The best thing, I think, that will happen this time around is, on the Kenya Kwanza government, for example, they have, an amazing economist in David D. And he spent his 10 years writing about Jubilee Habilis, for example. And now he's right in the middle of the government. And we expect him to call for accountability.
From inside.
From inside, right? And demand that Parliament, for example, take action, right? Take action. There must be managerial capability. If you are the manager responsible for breaching, for example, those fiscal principles, what led you to that? If you're taking, for example, we said, we had stories that there were resources that were used to do campaigns by the outgoing government. Then we need to see people being held accountable for that. If the Auditor General will flag, and that's the head of the Auditor General, and we are grateful because their work is to flag and say, these resources, there was no value for money on these resources. If it's these SDRs, they were not used for people's recovery. So they were used for consumption, they were used for campaigns. Then the Parliament, the Public Accounts Committee, for example, will pick it up and say, we want to see people in court over this decision. Because then we must build an economy that's accountable. We must have a civil service that's accountable. And as long as no one is asking them questions, we just don't want to, we don't want to hear, the accounting officer responsible or the one. We want to see, for example, a name being said, permanent secretary so-and-so was the one responsible, because the authority to incur expenditure is on them. So they signed off, so they should be demand accountability from their staff.
How can we demand accountability from Parliament? How can we make sure that we're oversighting Parliament to do its job? We saw the Parliamentary Budget Office even pleading with members of Parliament and telling the members of Parliament, look, we're an institution within Parliament that's supposed to help you in your decision-making process. Can you please be listening to what we tell you? This is the Parliamentary Budget Office asking the 13th Parliament, as you come to please, we will be advising you. Please, guys, how can we make sure that what has been pleaded by the Parliamentary Budget Office is actually taken up by these people that we elected the other day?
So first of all, the role of the media and the civil society must be, must go up at some point, because we are dealing with individuals, and we've seen, like for example, for their salaries they close LANC. We want our allowances. Now there's no longer opposition or government. They close. So it is now up to us as citizens, highlight those issues, spotlight, including respective members of Parliament, and say, we demand much more. Because if you're coming, the commitments that you're coming into Parliament for oversight, it's to support all of us as citizens, in a representative democracy. But for us as the media, as the business sector, as the civil society organizations, as think tanks, we must be able to generate evidence and say we are spotlighting on Parliament, because the weakest link within our public finance management has been on our Parliament. In fact, the open budget survey that we launched this year, we remember Parliament was completely the weakest link because they do not interrogate, for example, the budget implementation reports. So every quarter, the control of budget, the National Treasury will do a very good report. We are consuming it, but people who are responsible for asking them those questions directly, so that we can be more accountable, are not asking questions. They are busy with other things.
And it's not for lack of capacity.
No, they have capacity. It's just choice not to be accountable.
Because what we are saying here, because if the question is being asked, and if the question, hoping for a response that makes sense to the one who is asking the question, then further action would only dictate that you'll be extremely careful about how you go about these processes, because you know that you must be accountable to somebody, and you know that they're not going to let down their guard when they're asking and interrogating these issues. Then the likelihood of us seeing the wanton wastage, the wanton mismanagement, the underdevelopment that we are seeing, you know that somebody is going to ask you, so you're going to do it right. So are we essentially saying that because there is no accountability matrix in the Parliament that is supposed to be the one doing that, that's why we're going to continue to see these things happening in the manner in which they are?
Absolutely. And this Parliament has a challenge because, you have, first of all, the fiscal space has shrunk. They have got very little leeway for the money that they might need, especially the government. Dr. Luto's government has very little fiscal space. So they have to make very hard decisions. And those decisions have to be on Parliament. So first of all, is they have to support the government to cut wastage, right? And cutting wastage is spotlighting the civil service, the entirety of the civil service, and saying all those, for example, allowances. So, for example, if the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has cut on plenary allowance for members of parliament, why should we be paying civil servants who sit in a procurement committee to evaluate tenders? We pay them allowance for sitting, and their work as a procurement officer, you are paid
to
to
do
evaluate
that.
tenders.
Yes.
Right? This is so the parliament has to spotlight
Is this
on
what
these
happens?
things. Exactly. You sit in a committee, you get an allowance.
So somebody is employed in a
Right.
public service as to sit in a committee for tenders.
Yeah,
Well, when you sit in the committee for tenders, you get an allowance.
you get an allowance.
And at the end of the month, you get a salary.
You get a salary. And so that's what
Right.
Salary and Remuneration Commission said. Members of parliament, we are paying you to sit and make laws in the plenary.
Yes.
So why then should we be paying you that extra 5,000 every time you show up
time you show
in your
up.
office, right? To do that. So if Parliament spotlights on, for example, and supports the Salaries and Remuneration Commission to ensure that the wastage, is brought down,
Yeah.
then there are more resources. It's part of their oversight law is enhanced. Then there are more resources for the government to achieve, right? And especially for those who came under the Kenya Kwanza coalition, they have a glad manifesto they want to achieve. And that it's part of the resources they need for people's recovery, because we are coming out of a heavy campaign period. The economy, is hoping that the economy gets to recover fully.
Yeah.
So the Parliament has to choose not to be the weakest link.
Can I ask this question, James? When people are sworn in as parliamentarians, are there sets of trainings they go through? Okay, now I know understanding, standing orders, all those things. Yeah, I'm certain they're processes that they're taken through. But when it comes to, for instance, understanding their role, for instance, in budgeting, because we do have a budget-making parliament,
Yeah.
these matters that we are discussing, is there a platform in which our parliamentarians can actually be educated on these things so that they understand? Because if they're not, I'm assuming that we are giving them the role of discussing things that maybe they're not even capable of actually discussing effectively or making effective decisions on. Just because they were elected MPs doesn't automatically imbue them with the capacity to understand complex financial matters.
Absolutely.
Are they trained?
They are trained. In fact, Parliament has a fully fledged training institute, the Center for Parliamentary Studies and Training,
Yes.
which takes care of parliamentarians' welfare with regards to understanding Parliament.
Is there an exam?
Well, we might have to interrogate that further.
Yeah, because you see, the thing is, there are people who sleep in class, okay? So you may have a very serious curriculum, but nothing goes through. And all that is required for them to show that they've understood is when you have a session in parliament, they participate by either putting up their hands or they participate by not being present or whatever it is that they do.
kwenda huko.
Oh, where, yes. I am simply saying that this serious matter of looking after the economy and looking after the country requires a little more than just having an institution where people go to and they attend class. That's the end of that story.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we are hoping that this particular parliament, for example, we hope that they take their legislative work, seriously, because and most of them they are educated, and I hope they are also as learned.
James, I'd like to
we are
caution-
hoping.
I'd like to caution you here. This one, hope is inadequate here because people get into those halls. People get into that building. God alone knows what happens. Yes.
Yeah.
Things change.
Yes.
Things change.
Well, the Dr. William Ruto government, like you've said, James, if you look at the team that he established from the very beginning of his campaign, he had an economic council, which
Yeah.
we hope he's going to revive,
Yeah.
the National Socio and Economic Council.
Absolutely.
Dr. David Ndei, Professor Jogona Ndong, and the others, former Central Bank governor, and others have been in it. So there are people who understand these things that we're talking about. And they're sitting there and advising the president directly.
Yeah.
And from what they've told us, Dr. Ndei sat here and he told us, Dr. Ruto listens to what we tell him.
Yeah.
So that's where the hope can come in a little bit.
Yeah.
Even if we don't look at parliament, at least we can look at people who understand this thing, telling Dr. Ruto, look, this is something that's needed. And then Ruto taking in the advice and whipping his members in parliament and telling them, guys, please, let's work this way.
Yeah.
So hopefully
that will work.
That route could work.
But well, hope and prayers alone won't work.
We've prayed already, and there's hope.
Exactly.
So what
So
else
he's got
do
to
we
do the hard work, which is whipping those people to undertake their legislative work seriously.
Yeah.
Because he himself, as the president, for example, and his economic advisors cannot be able to do that. They don't have those powers. Those powers belong to parliament. They need to whip people. And including work with citizens. If someone, people are not able to do the legislative work, let's activate our recall clauses. At least let's send a message as citizens. We've got to get these things working, because we need to see more transparency, more accountability of these resources, like these allocations that were done, and Treasury has breached those free scope principles. It might have been good intentions, but we need to have seen a proper supplementary budget explaining the reason why we did this because of crisis. But we also want to see ultimately, like Parliament, asking for a special audit on this special drawing rights particularly. What exactly did these special drawing rights do? Yeah.
The other good thing is that now we have a finance expert as the leader of majority in the National Assembly, the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, who was chair of the Budget Committee. So a lot of weight rests on these people to make sure that Ruto's government then delivers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We look forward to seeing how they deliver that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
James, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.